Доброго дня.
Good afternoon. This is Media Center Ukraine Odesa. We continue our work today, and this briefing is dedicated to demining of the deoccupied territories. Our guest is Roman Drach, the specialist in this field, who has recently returned from the deoccupied territories, and he will tell us about his work there to make the territories there safe for people to return. Our unit performed duties in Kramatorsk region in the Donetsk region to demine the areas with the critical infrastructure like high voltage lines, roads, pipelines, and water pipelines and gas pipelines. We worked with the different types of devices, tank mines, grenades, multiple launch firing system, and self-made explosives. Can you share what you saw there? Several months ago, you were here telling about your experience in Mykolaiv and Kherson oblasts. What have you seen now in Donetsk Oblast that was a surprise for you? I can say that in Mykolaiv, Kherson, Chernihiv, Donetsk Oblasts, the general picture is almost the same. Big mined territories. They also mine every object that can be found in the buildings, outside, on the roadside. So they mine everything they can, like children toys, household appliances, furniture. So they create booby traps everywhere to harm civilians and the military. And the last question before I will give floor to my colleagues. Have you applied some new types of devices to demine the territories, including those tools that have been provided by our Western partners? Our unit has not received such devices, but we know that on the territory of Ukraine, there are automated systems that are used in Kherson and Kharkiv oblasts. There is a special demining machine, and we expect that the number of such machines will increase. That will help us to demine as many territories as possible. Now I would like to give floor to my colleagues. Dmitro Vasilyev, Suspilne. I have the following question. Can you tell us about some latest case that you saw there in Kramatorsk area when you faced some unique demining activities? We saw unusual mines, so classical mines that were used in a unique way. That was not typical for us. This is anti-tank mines just to trap a sapper during demining. And could you share more details? Because everything first that I can imagine is that they use anti-infantry mines. Anti-infantry mines are used on the ground. There can be booby traps for mines where they use two mines, and the second one is a surprise mine. And when it comes to explosive devices, some suspicious devices or tools, everything is destroyed at once because they can endanger life of our sappers. Don't forget to turn on the microphone, please. Svetlana Davzhuk, Rada TV channel. What are the most popular bases for such mines indoors? Can you share details about the process of the examination. Usually we can find such booby traps like indoors, in windows, under stairs, in household appliances. There they also use some grenades and other explosive devices, furniture, like doors of furniture, drawers. And once we found a grenade in a chandelier, just for it to blow up when you turn on the light. So they use such grenade instead of a lamp. And according to your experience, how many such booby traps you were able to find in one apartment or in one building or in one room? Sometimes they can mine the whole apartment, all the objects that you can find there. According to our experience in Kherson Oblast, it was impossible to demine the police office because of the huge amount of explosives there. At entry, at exit, all objects there were mined, so it was easier to destroy the building than to demine it. I have a question from my colleague, Anatoly, from the media center. Have you found some ammunition, mines, or other explosive materials that were not produced in Russia? Because we've received a lot of information about the possibility of China, Iran to supply such explosives to Russia. I have not had such experience. I have not heard about non-Russian mines there. Can you describe the process of your work? When you enter an apartment or a building, how do you examine the place not to endanger yourself, first of all? Just to share the algorithm of your work. Usually there is one person to enter the building, and the person has some lighting devices. First, he or she clears the entry, then the special devices are used to open the door, and then we can move inside. And all the objects in a building are examined with the help of a special device while we stay in a kind of a shelter there, not to take anything in our hand. How long does it usually take to demine such a building? Depending on the amount of tools there. And sometimes a day or even two. I might have a question about the volume of work that you have to perform. What is the amount of mining there in those deoccupied territories? Perhaps you've heard at the moment the territory of Ukraine is the most mined territory in the whole world. And you can understand the scale. No. The houses, the settlements, the fields are mined, the access routes, everything which can be mined is mined there. Are there injured? Do you have injured colleagues? And how many your colleagues were injured as a result of demining activities? Unfortunately, there are cases of injured and even killed people, because this is a separate work which is dangerous. During our last trip to Donetsk, everything was fine, but in Kherson, 6 people were killed and 2 were injured. Were those people from Odesa unit? No, from all over Ukraine. So, do you work in rotation to visit different regions? Perhaps your colleagues from Donetsk and Luhansk regions tell you something interesting, those who stay there all the time. Once they told me that during the examination in Kherson Oblast, the Luhansk experts found mined toilets. So there were such cases. So in Donetsk Oblast, you are closer to the front line. Does it make your work more difficult, especially taking into consideration that you need at least one day to demine a building, a house? Of course, the military activity has an impact on us because we understand that we can be shelled all the time. But for such cases, we have a special instruction. The head of the unit is obliged to take his team from the shelled area. Have you faced many such cases? Yes, several times. It was in the Bakhmut Rayon when we were closer to the front line. Before the Easter, we had to examine the areas with churches for people to be able to feel safe during the Easter ceremonies. You work on the occupied territories in Donetsk Oblast, so the territories which were liberated. What is the condition of those territories? Have you seen a lot of locals there? What did they tell you? There are some totally dead villages. Most of the villages there are destroyed and there are no locals there. So it is just a theater of military activity. Yes, so there is people cannot even return there because there is nothing there. There are some villages, but there's not so many civilians who return there. Are there such cases when people return home, even despite that they are warned that they should not do this before you demine their houses? Yes, there are such cases. Usually, when people plan to come back, they address the State Emergency Service. They apply for us to examine their territory and their houses. So the team arrives there for the examination, and only after the protocol is drafted, these people are allowed to enter their houses. What was the most difficult location for you? What was the most difficult in terms of demining? Was it a flat or a house? We didn't work long or a lot in Donetsk region in houses, in buildings, because our main task was to examine churches and the power supply lines to power up the villages for people to come back. So they mine the power supply lines. Yes, and they do this on purpose, the high voltage lines. And in other cases, we just find the path in the mined fields. For people, for engineers to be able to get to these power supply lines, yes, for them to be able to repair the destroyed lines and to work safely there. In Kharkiv Oblast, there is such a trend that the farmers try to come back home to their occupied territories to restore their activities there. Have you seen such cases in the Donetsk Oblast, or have there been addresses to you with the request to demine a field? In Kharkiv Oblast, agrarians have already started activities in the field. And this is not even the question now for Donetsk Oblast, because first we need to demine roads and the critical infrastructure for people to be able to return there and to live safely there. Are there any questions from my colleagues here? In this case, thank you very much for being with us here. We will gladly invite you here after your next trip. Please come to us and share your details, and because only after demining the life can be back there. And people are returning already. Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you for your work. And if there are any journalists who are interested in such a topic, please address us and we will gladly share with you the contacts with the demining experts for you to be able to prepare articles to cover this topic. Stay tuned, and the next week we'll have some interesting events for you.